if you guys saw Larry Wheel's latest video, the guy gained 52 pounds in less than 2 days. Dave Palumbo here for an RxMuscle rant. Today's topic is gaining weight after your show. How much is a good amount? How much is too much? How much is just simply crossing the line? Well, if you guys saw Larry Wheel's latest video, the guy gained 52 pounds in less than 2 days. That's pretty crazy. He went from like I guess he made 232 was his weight he had to make, and then he gained 52 pounds in just 2 days. And he probably didn't even eat 52 pounds worth of food. And he's like, I don't know how I did it. I don't know what's going on. How did I gain that much weight? And he still didn't look too bad. He looked bloated, but it wasn't too bad. The interesting thing about the video that he just released was that when it happened initially, I'm good friends with his video guy, Adam. And they had texted me and said, what should we do? Larry gained 52 pounds. And the inkling is it's very, very uncomfortable when you gain that much weight. And the first thing you automatically think of doing is going to the hospital because you think there's something wrong with you. I mean, your face gets so bloated, your eyes are like little slits. It hurts, to do anything really. I mean, your lower back is super crazy pumped. You start thinking maybe I'm in kidney failure. And it is scary. And the funny thing is about this situation was that when I first, and I've told this story before, but when I first did my first natural show ever, this was in I think it was 1990 or something like that, or it might have been, I think it was 1990, or it might have been right after. It might have been my second show. And it was the first time I had used like a lot of herbal diuretics. And I had never used regular diuretics at this point because I was still natural. So remember, I haven't taken any drugs, nothing. I just took a lot of like uva ursi and dandelion root, and I kind of restricted fluid for like, probably over 24 hours, And after the show was over, I just went crazy and ate everything in sight and drank tons of water and of course to rehydrate. And I gained 42 pounds. And I wasn't as big as Larry. I probably was only like 200 pounds at the time. But I gained 42 pounds in like 5 days. And by the end of the fifth, I looked huge. I looked good, People thought I would look enormous, because my arms were all pumped up and everything like that. But my lower back was killing me. I had to sit down between sets at the gym. It was so uncomfortable. And I was in medical school at the time. I probably looked like my face was like huge. And I panicked. So I went to I was in medical school at the time. So I went to the ER that was associated with the school, because I knew everyone there. And then I said, I don't know what to do. And they ran, blood work on me and everything like that. And they said, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. And I remember the doctor came in and he said, yeah, I was in Vietnam and we didn't drink for like 3 days. And when we got back to camp, we drank like 2 6-packs of beer. He goes, and I'm still around to tell you, what's going on. I said, well, what does that have to do with my situation? I said, are my kidneys good? He's like, yeah. So at that point, I realized he wasn't going to help me out at this point. All I knew was that I was healthy. So then I went back on the herbal diuretics, and within a day or two, I started peeing out all that water, and I felt 1,000,000 times better. The problem was I was afraid to take diuretics. I thought maybe I had damaged my kidneys or something like that. I didn't know that this was something that happened because at the time there was no internet. There was no information. No one tells you this stuff. Probably no one would eat to the extreme that I did because I have a crazy appetite when I'm hungry. And I just overdid it. And what I should have done is I should have stayed on some diuretics. So after that show, that learning experience, I never allowed myself to go over like 10 to 12 pounds right after a show. So if I saw myself gaining, too much weight, what I would do is I would start taking, once I was using regular diuretics, I would just take a little Diazide and keep my weight down, because what's happening is it's a water rebound. So what happened to Larry is, and why he couldn't figure out, yes, he ate a lot of junk food, but it wasn't like that much. It's not the food that was making him weigh that much, it was the water. So his body was in shock, and his body said, wait a minute, we got to retain all this fluid because this guy may never give us any more liquids to drink. We haven't had liquids in 36 hours, and this guy's pumping us full of diuretics. So what happens on a physiological level is that when you start restricting fluids and or taking diuretics, what you're basically doing is you're pumping sodium out of the body, okay? Especially if you're using Diazide or Lasix or something like that. So you're pumping sodium out. When sodium leaves the body, water follows, right? So Larry had to make weight twice. He had to do it twice for 2 shows. So his sodium levels were low. His water levels and hydration levels were low because he had to make weight. And what happens in response to that? Well, the body says, wait a minute, there's not enough sodium coming in. And the body is also saying that there's not enough fluid coming in, but more so it's monitoring sodium because sodium is responsible for muscle contraction and stuff like that. So the body says there's not enough sodium, so it releases a hormone from the adrenal glands known as aldosterone. Aldosterone's main job in the body is sodium balance. So the less sodium coming into the body, the higher the aldosterone level. And that's one of the reasons why I tell people don't restrict sodium in your diet throughout the year, or even when you're dieting, because the more you restrict sodium, the higher the aldosterone levels go in the body because the body wants to have enough sodium, right? It wants to have the right salt balance in the body. And if it doesn't have it, it's going to release aldosterone. And then anytime you do consume sodium, you're going to retain salt. So here's Larry restricting sodium, taking diuretics probably to make weight, maybe not drinking enough. Aldosterone's through the roof, super high, super high. But, he does a show, he's on the diuretics, he can't retain fluid. Even if he's eating salt, it's not staying in his body, it's going right out through the kidneys. Now the show's over, right? What does he do? He goes and drinks and starts eating. And what is he eating? Super salty foods, which is fine because you want to restore sodium balance, right, to the body because he knows he's sodium deficient. So there's nothing wrong with eating high salt foods. The problem is that aldosterone is here when it's normally here. And so every milligram of sodium that's going into his body is getting retained. So his body is not peeing any out. Like normally, the excess sodium just gets peed out by your kidneys and released and no big deal. Now he's retaining every milligram of sodium he takes in, which means he's retaining fluid with it. So every milligram of sodium retains a certain amount of fluid with it, and this just keeps building. So everything he's drinking, he's peeing basically nothing out of his body. He's retaining everything. And I think within the first 24 hours, I think he gained like 30 pounds or something like that, which is pretty crazy. I don't know if I've never had that happen to me. At that point, what he should have done is he should have taken a half a Diazide or even a whole Diazide and get rid of that water, pump it out, because it's not serving any purpose. Aldosterone is starting to come down now as his body is retaining more and more sodium, because as the sodium's coming in, the aldosterone levels, and eventually, once his body has enough sodium in it, the aldosterone levels will shut off. The problem is that the body is still retaining that sodium and that water that he consumed. So by taking a diuretic that pushes exclusively sodium out, like Diazide, he's just going to get rid of the sodium and the water is going to follow out. And by and far, as long as he doesn't overdo it, his body should not be retaining any more sodium because aldosterone levels are now normal. Now, it usually takes about a week to 10 days to kind of normalize that rebound effect. But if you retain an enormous amount of fluid and then you push it out with a diuretic, whether it be a half a diet, I usually tell people take a half a Diazide every day if you need it until your weight kind of normalizes itself. So what you're doing is you're just pumping out the sodium that your body retained. The key is to not stop eating sodium, because if you just go on a sodium-free diet again, what's going to happen? Aldosterone levels are going to build up again, and you don't want to get that second rebound. So while you're pumping this extra sodium out with the diuretic that you're going to take, you stay on normal. You don't have to eat excessive amounts, but stay on normal sodium levels. Drink normally. Don't overdrink. And just allow the diuretic to do its job and get rid of that extra sodium and water. And eventually, once your body gets to a level that it considers, comfortable for itself, sodium level wise, you'll stop retaining fluid. It only takes usually like 3 to 5 days. The worst it's ever taken me was 10 days. I just had I think once again, because I think it was a 2-day show I did, back in the day, they used to do the men on Friday night was the prejudging, and then the night show would be Saturday night. So it was really like I was on diuretics and limiting fluid intake for 2 days. So the rebound is always worse when you do it for 2 days as opposed to a one-day show, which is most of the time nowadays. Everything is pretty much a one-day show except the Olympia. So that's the key. The key is after the show's over, continue to take a little diuretic as needed, and the only way to really judge that would be to weigh yourself. So if you weigh 250 pounds the day of the show, and then you go up to, you're 265 the next day, take a half a diazide. If your body's not going up very much, then don't worry about it. Now, toward the end of my career, I would use like maybe a half a diazide the night before and maybe a half, after prejudging. And I never restricted sodium. And I didn't restrict my drinking that much. I didn't rebound as much as I did early in my career where I was kind of on that more of a deplete, for 3 days and restrict sodium. And I did a lot more extreme things, I think, because that was kind of the in vogue thing to do back in the 90s. And what I realized was that I was just over dehydrating myself. So I would always cramp a lot of times, early in my career in the 90s when I was competing, because I think I just used, probably too many diuretics and didn't eat enough sodium. As I realized that, hey, you know what, sodium is important for muscle fullness and stuff like that, I noticed that my look was better on stage and I didn't have quite as much of a rebound. Now, when you have to make weight like Larry does for classic physique, that's a different story, because now you're doing more extreme things that you normally wouldn't do, and taking your body weight down lower, and you're using more diuretics usually to do that, and restricting more because you have to make a weight, and then you want to fill up. So it's like you're creating more of a rebound. And once again, it's counterintuitive sometimes to say, hey, I'm retaining all this fluid. Maybe my kidneys aren't working. Maybe I shouldn't be taking a diuretic, when in fact, that's exactly what you need to do. You need to pump that water out. You don't want all that water surrounding your heart and making it hard for your heart to beat and for you to breathe. Not good. That is not healthy. You want that water out. Matter of fact, when I had my cardiac surgery, right after surgery, anytime they do open heart surgery on you, your body has this rebound effect and it holds a lot of fluid. And they just pump you with IV Lasix. And I'm not a guy who retains fluid, but I look like a 300-pound bodybuilder after my surgery, the day after, a couple days after, and they were pumping me with, IV Lasix several times a day, and I was just peeing like a racehorse. And it took probably a week for my body to regulate. I couldn't believe that my body was actually able to handle that much Lasix, because, I'm so sensitive usually. But after a while, I started feeling it. I know when my body doesn't need anymore. I said, you guys can't give me any more of this stuff. I'm good now. And they feed you a sodium-free diet in the hospital, which is the worst thing, because what happens is your aldosterone level stays up here, so you need it longer. I was sneaking down to the meal place where they have the cafeteria on the snack shop, whatever they have down there, and I was stealing packets of sodium and salting my food, because I knew that I had to balance my electrolytes or I was going to keep rebounding like that, and I was feeling terrible after a while from it. Initially, it felt good to get rid of the water. Then it doesn't feel good anymore. And that's why I'm saying initially you'll take those, that half a diazide a day or a full diet, maybe half in the morning, half at night. Once the water's gone, don't restrict sodium or continue to restrict sodium, because you're going to create a second rebound and you're going to feel terrible. So what did we learn here? It was a learning experience, and I'm glad that Larry shares all this stuff, full transparency, on his Instagram and on his YouTube channel, because it helps people. There are a lot of new guys going into the sport, and they're going to experience this for the first time, and it's very, very uncomfortable. And I try to educate people as much as possible, but it's good to get the word out if you are experiencing a really bad rebound. And this goes for women too. There's nothing wrong, and you should stay on a little diuretic, whether you're using an herbal diuretic or you're using a prescription diuretic, just a little bit. Get that extra water out. After 3 to 5 days, you should be fine. No more than a week probably. And once you do, you'll be feeling a lot better. Trust me. You do not want to retain 20 pounds. Even though you feel strong in the gym and you look pumped and your friends tell you, wow, you look great, it's not good for you. It's just water. And it's not good for your heart. It's not good for your body. It puts too much stress. It raises blood pressure. So get rid of that extra water. And I promise you, after a week, you will thank me. All right, guys. Larry, glad you're feeling better. Feel free to reach out anytime. Dave Palumbo with an RxMuscle rant.